Look at this sweet little grandma. She looks like someone who could cook a pie for her five great grandchildren to share. We could probably see her quietly knitting away in a rocking chair, listening to the birds chirp in the air. But did you know that she was responsible for an ethnic cleansing operation? Welcome to this video about America's first female U.S. Senator, Rebecca Latimer Felton. Hello, YouTube and Patreon members. Today is a members only video about a senator who broke a lot of records, and her name is Rebecca Latimer Felton from Georgia, known as Georgia's Grand Old Lady. However, she does have an interesting past, with some of it being good and some of it being the worst that you can imagine from a human being. With that, let's dive into the life of Georgia's Grand Old Lady. So, what are the records that she holds? Well, she is the first ever female U.S. Senator in the U.S. Senate, becoming a senator in 1922. She was, at that time, the oldest person to join the U.S. Senate at 87 years old. She wasn't the oldest to serve in the Senate, of course, as Strom Thurmond served until he was 243 years old. Fenton also was the shortest serving senator in the United States, only serving one day in office. She was also the last slaveholder to sit in the U.S. Senate, but of course, she didn't own slaves when she served. Her slave owning past is what we can call foreshadowing. Now, if you look at her Wikipedia page, it says that Felton was a senator from October 3rd until November 22nd, which is much longer than one day. But she was appointed by the governor to replace Senator Thomas Watson, who had died a month earlier. Georgia Governor Thomas Hardwick appointed Felton to the seat because he didn't want someone to hold the seat who he thought might run in the special election for the seat to replace Watson, of which Hardwick himself was a candidate for. Still, Hardwick, who strongly opposed the Ku Klux Klan, would lose to Walter George, a strong civil rights opponent and backer of many big businesses in Georgia, including Coca-Cola. To that point, Felton hadn't taken the oath of office yet in Washington, D.C., thus she wouldn't officially be a U.S. Senator until she took the oath. Walter George decided to postpone his swearing in by one day and let Felton take the oath of office as Georgia's senator for one day. So even though she had replaced Watson on October 3rd, she wasn't officially a senator until November 21st, with George taking over on the 22nd. Looking at her early life when the Civil War broke out, Rebecca Felton was 25 years old, as well as a slaveholder. Felton and her husband, who would later serve in Congress, were initially opposed to the South breaking away from the Union, but then changed their views in order to protect their ownership of slaves. So, yeah, when people say the Civil War wasn't about slavery, for the Feltons, the Civil War was absolutely about slavery. After the war, the Feltons had almost lost everything, as their entire plantation was based on slave labor. Interestingly, she first became politically involved when she heard about the sexual abuse of a black girl who was serving a harsh sentence on a chain gang. She petitioned the Georgia legislature to protect female prisoners from abuse, regardless of their race. While Rebecca Felton is known more for her views on race, which we will talk about in a second because they were extreme, she treated feminism as an issue of higher priority in her early political activism. If some issue was an intersection of race and gender, she would usually look at it through the lens of gender over race. This actually made other white Southern feminists look at Felton negatively, as they thought that white female prisoners should be treated better than black prisoners. In Georgia at the time, education was restricted for girls, not just for the number of years girls were taught, which was usually less than boys, but the subjects they were taught as well. Granted, there wasn't much in the way of science and math being taught in rural Georgia schools in the 1890s, but boys were taught more practical skills while girls were taught to be homemakers. But she challenged this view, supporting girls to be able to take courses that focus mostly on family finances. She also said that a lot of the pressure is put too much on women, but Felton said that instead of the woman being responsible, it's really the man's responsibility, as he is the one that needs to provide for the family. If he can't provide for the family, then she can't help her children. Oddly enough, this was a controversial stand at the time. But not only did she fight for prison reform, but also education reform, which I just mentioned, as well as fighting for the poor in rural communities and being part of the temperance movement. But one of the things that she was well known for was her suffragette work, as she had advocated for a woman's right to vote for nearly 20 years before that right was finally granted in 1920. Many people think that women were allowed to vote in 1919, but that's when the 19th Amendment was introduced. It didn't become law until 1920. Still, in the state of Georgia, women wouldn't be able to vote until 1922, since the government of Georgia said that it was too late to have women registered to vote in 1920. Still, Felton was one of the fighters to get women the right to vote, but the reason why she wanted to give women the right to vote might not be what you think. Now, let's not sugarcoat it here. Felton was a racist. I mean, an extreme racist. She looked at African Americans as inferior and called them debased, lustful brutes. This played into the sexual assault myths that persisted regarding African American men, in which in many places today still exist. Since she was a slaveholder, she supported the myth that slaves actually liked being in slavery and that they were much less happy being free as the slave owners provided for them. She even went as far as supporting having an exhibit at the Chicago World's Fair about Southern life showing slaves having a happy life while being a slave. She also attacked Uncle Tom's Cabin as being a myth. However, things turned extremely bad starting on August 11th, 1898, when Felton gave a speech in front of the Agricultural Society of Tybee Island in eastern Georgia, where she said that in order to protect white women from being raped by black men, the practice of lynching should continue, quote, 1,000 times a week if necessary, end of quote. This view was oddly connected to both her views on feminism and a woman's right to vote. See, she thought that white men were not protecting white women from the mythical violence that she had been a so called advocate for. Therefore, she supported two things to protect white women, which was the continuation of lynching and giving the women the right to vote. Her entire reason for supporting a woman's right to vote was so that it could dilute the black vote in the South. I mean, Jim Crow laws were already in effect at this time, so black voters were already severely undermined when it came to voting. With that, her feminism was solely based on white supremacy by the time of her political career starting, which is a flip from what she had done previously. But her speech at Tybee Island was circulated around Georgia and reached many other states as well. One of the places that it reached was Wilmington, North Carolina, where the newspaper, the Daily Record, which was an African American run newspaper, published a rebuttal by the paper's editor, Alexander Manley, who said that many white women had consented to having relationships with black men. See, Manley himself was a mixed race child and a descendant of Charles Manley, a North Carolina governor known for having relationships with his slaves. The backlash to Manley's editorial led to the Wilmington massacre in November, where white supremacists and business owners drove African Americans out of Wilmington, either forcing them to relocate or through murder, with some estimates of over 300 African Americans being killed. While many consider this a massacre, I think ethnic cleansing would probably be more of an appropriate term. The Daily Record was burnt down, but Manley was able to escape the night before because he was informed that he was to be killed once captured. Felton went on to call Manley's editorial slanderous. So, yes, this little grandma and first female senator was responsible for an ethnic cleansing operation. 23 years later, Felton was seated in the U.S. Senate. At first, it was unknown if she would be allowed to be seated as Walter George was to be seated, but the Senate allowed it, making her the first U.S. senator who was a female. By the time she was put in the U.S. Senate, it seems as if all of her lynching talk magically disappeared now that she was a historic figure. But modern history has focused more on her extreme racist views more than her iconic one day in office, as well as being the first female senator. So, with that short video about America's first senator, thank you for joining me today in this video. Thank you for being a Patreon and YouTube member. I'll try to get more uplifting videos in the future, but I thought this was a video that a lot of people don't know about. So, thank you all very much. Have a wonderful day, and I'll see you in the next video.